I'm Charlie Bride of Gold Derby, and I am speaking today with Joel Kim Booster, the star and writer of the Hulu original movie Fire Island. The first question I got to ask you, Joel, is how long were you taking the script around and trying to get it made?
It's interesting because my journey with this movie, it started originally as a pilot script. I originally intended to sell this as a television show. The concept was a little bit, it was a little different at the onset, but I always knew I wanted to write about Bowen and I's friendship, and I knew I wanted it set on Fire Island. And yeah, I initially wrote it as a spec script for a half-hour television pilot, and I took that around for several months, and we couldn't even find a production company who wanted to partner with us to take it out. Quite honestly, it was really tough to get anyone interested in this idea. It's funny. Looking was evoked a lot as a reason why people were sort of hesitant to touch this idea, which was strange to me. People pointed to the quote unquote failure of Looking as a reason why people weren't hungry for this kind of entertainment, which is funny to even say that Looking was a failure. It had two seasons in the movie, which is, in my eyes, a pretty big success for a show like that. And it wasn't until I met with Quibi that they presented me with the idea of actually turning it into a movie, or as much of a movie at Quibi, basically a movie that was broken up into 10 chapters. And so it was probably a year or so after I initially wrote the pilot version of the story that Quibi came on and really believed in it. I mean, say what you will about Quibi, but they were taking a lot of chances on a lot of different ideas and different creators, and they were the only ones who at the time were interested in this story.
It's funny you mentioned that, but mentioned Looking, because when you first mentioned that, I was thinking to myself, oh, wait a minute. What? I was like, wait a minute. Looking, I loved Looking, and I know so many people that loved it, but I forgot that when it was airing, the numbers were not good, and that it had that whole negative connotation to it. It wasn't until maybe like a couple years after the second season that it had a more positive connotation to it. So actually, I was going to wait to ask this until a bit later, but you brought up Bowen, and I was wondering, could you describe how long you've known Bowen, and what your relationship has been like with him?
I've known Bowen for coming up on 10 years now at this point. We met in New York coming up as comedians and comedy people. And it was funny, we told this story in press a lot leading up to Fire Island, but someone tried to introduce us when I first moved to New York immediately. And they couched it though in, oh, there's this other gay Asian comedian that you should know. And I think because that's how it was presented to us, we were both sort of hesitant to meet because we didn't want that person to be right. There was a little bit of hesitation there. But then once we did meet, we met at a show, and it was almost an immediate sort of connection, because suddenly, as much as we didn't want to be sort of watered down to those two identity boxes, it was very immediately apparent to both of us that we needed each other to a certain extent, and we didn't even realize how much we needed each other that moment. To just feel seen in that way by another person was really, really powerful, I think, for both of us as people who felt marginalized in the entertainment industry, as people who felt marginalized in the gay community, people who felt sort of at odds with certain more conservative parts of the Asian community. So there was all these intersecting struggles and joys that we had together, and it was really transformative for me to have a friend like Bowen in my corner.
I know what you're talking about on a certain level, because I've had those moments with some people. of, oh, you're gay, I know this person who's gay, you two should
Right.
totally meet up. I can only imagine having the extra veneer of the same ethnicity being put onto that.
Right.
So another person that has such a great, presence in this movie is Margaret Cho. I remember watching All American Girl when it first premiered on ABC, and what was it, 1994, 1995, I think it was. And I've been a fan of her stand up for decades now. I can't believe I'm saying decades, but uh, um, did it mean a lot to you to have Margaret Cho be a part of this cast?
It meant the world and more to me. I think I also remember watching All American Girl when it first premiered, and it sticks in my mind as sort of the transformative power of representation. I never saw, it was the first time I can remember. I don't remember much about the plot of the show, but I can remember sitting like 10 inches away from the television, just enamored and like so drawn in by the story of a family that looked like me for the first time. And so she really changed my life in that regard. She changed my life again with her stand-up career. Really was like the only voice in stand-up that I remember listening to and feeling seen by. And so to have her in this project was a real full circle moment for me in a lot of ways. I think my favorite response that I've gotten from people who've seen the film is from gay Asian men who, have told me that they similarly had, felt seen for the very first time because of my movie. And I know firsthand how powerful that sensation can be. And so I'm really happy to be a part of this larger tapestry of Asian American and queer representation in this world that Margaret is sort of like the foundation of for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And what made you think that Andrew Ahn was the right person to direct this movie?
Um, I mean, the thing is like we talk so much about representation on screen, and I think it's equally as important, if not more so at times, to have diversity behind the camera as well, and to make sure that the people who are telling these stories um, have a real understanding, a real in their bones understanding of the kind of story that we were trying to tell. And Andrew fit that bill so incredibly well. I mean, I'm such a huge fan of Spa Night and Driveways, and was such a huge fan of him as a filmmaker. But to then also have someone who was able to talk to me and understand the story I was trying to to tell on a cellular level was also so powerful. And I to get to tell this story with him is one of the greatest joys of my life.
So, we're in the middle of an interesting of a weird time right now as a queer community, because it felt like just maybe like a year or two ago we had made so much progress, but now it feels like there's like the people that are trying to hold on to an old way of thinking are like trying to chip away at that. And I'm curious as to how important do you think it is to have a movie like this in the mainstream when there's so much hysteria being whipped up against the queer community?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really difficult because on one hand, I think we're starting to see sort of some of the limitations of representation politics in the media. There's only so much that just seeing a person that looks like you can do for a person when there are laws being legislated right now that are attacking our fundamental human rights. But at the same token, I think that it's really important for people in this country to understand us as human beings, and one of the ways that we do that is either by being in their lives on a personal level or representing ourselves on screen and in the media. And I think not everyone is not so lucky to know a queer person in their life personally, and it's movies like mine and like Bros and Single All the Way and movies like that I think can really be powerful agents of change for people who may not interact with queer people or may not see us as fully human. And I think like movies like mine that sort of explore the breadth of human experience within our community can be really powerful tools in helping in terms of growing understanding and empathy and really hopefully changing hearts and minds to understand that we are not evil, we are not deviants, we're just people that are looking for joy in our lives like you are.
So, what I think it's funny that that you come from the stand-up world, and to have this kind of movie made, and I think I'm wondering if it gives you a certain sort of like a shield when it comes to like viewing criticisms of the movie, especially like from like random people on Twitter who like the point of certain things just obviously have gone right over their head. And I have very much a very similar a view of things, especially when it comes to things that are being critical. And I was curious, was there any criticism of the movie that you found from, like, I don't know, maybe random people on social media or something that you heard that you found particularly amusing?
Um, I think like there wasn't necessarily criticism that I found amusing. I find it funny. There is still a lot of respectability politics at play within our community, and I think like my movie, I really wanted to represent my own personal experience and my world, my sort of my small corner of our community. And I think there's definitely a lot of gay guys who are sort of like, why does every gay guy have to be flamboyant on screen and so loud and sassy and sex, positive and all of these things? And I think like they're sort of missing the point a little bit of the film, because there were a lot of other kinds of gay guys in my movie, not just the chaotic slut that I was in the film. I think Conrad Ricamora, Bowen's character, there was a breadth of experience, and I think that was frustrating to see, but funny in its own way. And I listen, I didn't get everything right in my movie. I don't think every movie can get everything right. And so there was definitely criticism of the movie that I took to heart and that I really absorbed. But that kind of stuff just made me laugh, really.
And one other thing I'm very curious about is, what was it like? How did you bring the rest of that core cast together, especially of the five friends?
That was the most difficult part of the process, was getting that solving that math equation, and getting I think like the first piece of the puzzle was Matt Rogers, who's also a very close friend of mine for over almost a decade now. And I would be lying if I didn't a little bit write Luke for Matt. I think like he is someone who plays caustic and larger than life in the same way that Luke is. And I knew he would bring a certain level of humor and humanity to the part that was really important, because, Luke is the Lydia stand-in. Lydia is like, a brat. And so is Luke. And I needed somebody who would be able to balance all of the sort of more caustic qualities of Luke and also bring humor and life and lovability to it at the same time. And then it was down to Torian and Tomas, and those characters were really difficult to cast because they were, of the core five, I think, given the least amount of real estate narratively, and so we needed two actors who would really bring a lot of themselves to the parts and really fill in sort of a lot of the gaps that were left over just by, through cuts that needed to happen because of length and things like that. And you can't have a huge ensemble cast and service everyone equally. And so I needed two people that wouldn't be lost in the mix, and who would be able to hold their own with, only a few lines sometimes. And Tomas really, when we landed on Tomas, I mean, we were immediately sort of like, this is the person for this role. I had never seen a tape quite like that, and I never I still have not met somebody quite like Tomas again. And Torian blew us away. I mean, I worked with Max was by far the hardest character to cast in the show, in the movie, because of, you know, they needed to feel distinct from the other characters. And there's a lot of sort of characterization overlap between Max and Bowen's character and even my character, and they needed to be bookish and a little uptight, but also again lovable. And I worked with Torian as a playwright in Chicago in 2014. I cast him in a short play back then, and I remember we had been running through every tape imaginable for Max, and I just said to our casting directors, I don't know what made me think of Torian, but I just was like, what about this guy? And we found him, got him to put himself on tape, and we sort of immediately were like, again, it just felt so right.
Well,
and then we needed to seem like a friend group, and that really came together really organically. I think immediately we got together before the first table read and just hung out, you know, and those boys and they are sort of like still like my family. We're, you know, we have a very active group chat, and I feel so lucky that I got to do this with them.
Well, Joel, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best over this Emmy season, and to all of our viewers, make sure to keep coming to Gold Derby for all your Emmy needs and all for everything for the Emmy nominations coming out on July 12th. Thanks so much.
Thank you.